Okay, so I'm back. What I was basically going off was when they said we want to be respectful of local customs and laws. If I'm not mistaken, customs would also refer to like religious beliefs and all that. The swastika was in fact a religious symbol. So saying that we want to be respectful of local customs, you're really not, because you're also kind of picking on a religious symbol as well. I mean, it's unfortunate that they used such a bad symbol or such a religious symbol and tainted it with all the evil, but so has pretty much every other thing that was used before or used prior to the Nazis using it. Like, for instance, goose stepping used to be a traditional military, used to be a military tradition in pretty much the entire world's armed forces. Because, they used it for parading events and stuff. Nowadays, only a few countries actually do something close to that, or they just don't call it that entirely, or they just don't do it at all. Because the Nazis did it. This is the same country that also kind of destroyed their own national anthem, too. You can't sing the first two stanzas of the actual national anthem because it's actually outright banned. Even though the anthem was written centuries, or like a century before Nazi Germany even took off. Which, again, kind of upsets me that you're kind of destroying your own history by doing this. And you know what I keep saying about history? Those who don't acknowledge that certain things have happened, nor talk about it, nor teach it, are destined to repeat it. But the other thing that kind of bugs me is okay, especially going back to the religious symbol standpoint, whether you agree that this was a good thing that happened or not, let's look at the Crusades. Many of those people fought just to, have a pilgrimage set up in the Holy Land, but they didn't come without any guilty incidents either. Like the first Crusades, for instance, when Knights Templars helped take back the Holy Land in Jerusalem, they slaughtered all those who didn't convert to Christianity. So I hate to make this as a comparison, but that could equally almost be the medieval equivalent to the Nazi swastika, the Red Cross. So again, it's a measly symbol. No matter how many times you replace it, you still aren't going to replace what happened. So I feel as though it's pointless to replace a symbol. Now, unless there's a country that says, yeah, that's not okay, then that would make sense. I mean, I'd still kind of, be disgruntled with said countries that decide to ban it, but, that's their problem, and I'm not going to worry about it. As far as multiplayer goes, I can understand why they would censor it as well, because, they did say it was being played by all. It's not just exclusive to US servers, where in US you could pretty much have any symbol, portrayed in a video game, because, we have that freedom of speech to a certain limit or whatever. Let's continue reading this. Campaign will take a different approach, which we can stand behind. I firmly stand behind the approach we took in multiplayer, which is different. That sounds pretty complex, but okay. In the campaign, Sledgehammer has worked to ensure it's historically accurate throughout. There are female soldiers in the campaign, but they are exclusive to the divisions they fought in during World War II. That, again, makes sense. I'm glad they did it, but I'm kind of disappointed that they didn't do so in the multiplayer as well. It seems like adding insult to injury. There's a French female soldier which players will interact with in the campaign. Beyond just playing as Private Red Daniels in the campaign, the player will also get the chance to play as, and I'm sorry if I mispronounce, Rousseau, a French resistance leader. You will meet up with the French resistance and play as the strong female French resistance leader, Rousseau. And that's important. That happened in the conflict, and we know that. In the multiplayer, Sledgehammer is bringing a wide range of customization options to the players. Oh my god, please don't have any dabbing of any kinds. That would be stupid. And players can choose how their character looks. It's totally up to each player. Sledgehammer says they can understand that during World War II, there were no black German soldiers fighting the Axis power, but not for multiplayer. They want the customization of the player to be controlled by the player themselves. Okay, so I'm lighting up to the idea as long as they give us complete control over the customization for that, then I can see that being okay. But if it was like, oh, well, we're making these the only skins available, and here you go, and it's like, this isn't right. This was impossible. They couldn't even enlist in that kind of division. They would be killed, sort of thing. But okay, I mean, I'm still disappointed by it, but at least they'll hopefully give us 100% customization ability for our character skins for each faction. And so, that evolution of your character means it's important for us to allow you to choose to be you, and to have a hero that represents who you are, whomever you choose that to be. So if you're female or you want to play as a female, if you don't want to be any of the multinational cast of characters that to represent who you are, to look up to and respect as your avatar, we want to give you that opportunity. Now, I want to take a pause for that moment. I hope that does not mean that people will just basically decide to do, and I'm not, again, trying to pick on a certain, on a certain individual or anything like that, but I don't want it to basically go completely, out of proportion here when people say, oh, well, I just want to have a transgender character. It's like, I don't think they even had transgender people in World War II. Was modern science even that advanced enough for people to do that sort of thing yet? I don't know how I'd feel about that. Moving on, because I don't want to get too controversial here. Now the challenge here, which is real, is half the time you will be playing on the Axis team. That was a decision we made intentionally. We wanted to be you, and we're willing to have you be you, no matter what side of the conflict you are on. And again, for the record, not everybody who was a member of the Axis powers were not evil. Okay, majority of the Wehrmacht were not evil. In fact, many of them didn't even know what was going on with the Holocaust, because, again, Hitler kept it in certain way, among certain parties in certain areas, he kept it well hidden. Even from his own people, he said, oh, they're going someplace safe. Okay, well, I mean, we didn't really see what was a problem with them anyway, but okay, if you're sending them off to their own safe haven, that's fine, I guess. Until they realized that they were being sent to their death. Then they're like, oh my god, we did this. We let this happen. Some German soldiers also felt that way as well, and even if they said, oh, well, I hate to say it, but we're going to lose, we may have to surrender, you had Nazi people like the SS saying, you can't surrender. And why not? If you do, I get to kill you. And every single person who has defied the orders of the Fuhrer, first of all, is the Fuhrer really that well of a military tactician? He was a corporal during World War I. He doesn't know a first thing about actual combat. He was a mail carrier, basically. Whereas these generals who have actually worked their way upwards and didn't just have their rank handed to them as a political statement to basically hold a position. These guys earned their officer ranks and all that. They know what it's like to be on the front lines. Erwin Rommel, for instance, he's one of the guys that I tend to respect the most because he defied so many of Hitler's orders to kill Jews, and he was allowed to get away with it because he was a national war hero, among other things. But he eventually was ordered to kill himself after a attack or an attempt on Hitler's life occurred, which actually had a movie about it. Anyway, back to this. I'll come right through the front door on it. We know that didn't happen in the German forces. We know there was a lot of racism and racial tension in the 1940s. So you wouldn't have a black German soldier fighting next to the other Germans. We want this to be about you. We're not making a statement about the authenticity of the Axis force. We're making this about putting you in this social space and you into your soldier, and we want that to be rewarding and meaningful. I don't want it to be our decision to force you away from your character into playing a German soldier just because we put you on the Axis team. So while being historically accurate is in the campaign, the MP experience is allowing players to play as characters they want to. It's all about historical accuracy in multiplayer. It is also about allowing the community to build their own character to play in these modes. Again, I respectfully would disagree because, given that it's kind of wrong to do that, the funny or the weird thing is, and I can't speak for World War II vets because I doubt even if there are some alive out there, which I know there are, I doubt any of them would even bother to play something like this. But I feel as though that would be a slap to the face to many of those people who actually fought and lost their best friends in. Because, especially if you're going to depict a real life event, they're not going to say, hell no, a black guy didn't kill my friend. No, a fucking Nazi did. It's so weird. It's so dumb. But, I mean, whatever. I guess you're gonna just do that. Might as well just fucking go for it. But, it kind of brought to my attention, though, I feel as though, okay, even with multiplayer being in zombies mode being completely open as a global thing, why not just add a content filter to it? And for those who don't know what I'm talking about, I'm basically referring back to the very older games, like World at War and stuff. Those games had gibbing, which was the dismemberment of limbs and such, like legs and arms being blown off by machine guns, high-powered rifles, or just downright fragmentation grenades. You have that ability to turn that off. You know that, right? That's why they put the content filter in there. And of course, we've got Modern Warfare 2, which actually asked players in certain versions of the game if it wasn't banned, if the mission wasn't outright banned in the country, where they ask the player or give them a little warning heads up saying, what you're about to see is extremely controversial. However, we are giving you, the player, the option to skip it if you don't like it. However, if you skip it, which they don't actually say in the thing word for word, but they say, but you kind of miss the plot. It takes a huge chunk out of the plot. So it doesn't really make much sense to skip it, but you can actually censor it too. So that's a possibility. They've also censored language. For instance, World at War had a moment where Sullivan would say, Tojo's at home in this shit. However, if you have the content filter enabled, it'll say, Tojo's at home in this, and just end there. So, why not just add a content filter for multiplayer as well? I mean, even if people are still not satisfied with the game, why not just have a content filter that also censors symbols too, or certain things that they don't like? I mean, why does it have to be extremely exclusive to the campaign part? Why not just expand that and make it available for all the game modes? That way, if people who still want to have it as historically accurate, where say if I wanted to play a multiplayer game and want to have all the original symbolism, regardless of how bad it was, I could have that enabled, and if I didn't like it, I could just use a content filter and turn it off. Same goes for Nazi zombies. Why does it have to be just censored altogether? Like, did they not think of this? Or is that even possible? I almost want to say that it is definitely possible. I mean, we've seen people get rid of gibbing by turning the, like, content filter on, so why don't they just expand the abilities of the content filter to all 3 game modes and also give it something else to censor if people are offended by it? I'm not saying I believe in censorship, but if people are so butthurt about it and they want to censor stuff, they can go ahead. But I don't want that to I don't want them to basically manipulate an entire AAA franchise to go this route entirely just because they liked it. Like, they were the large group of people who liked it that much. Like, for instance, I don't want people to say, oh, I really liked what you did with Black Ops 3, which had all the dabs and stuff. Can we do that in World War II? No, I don't want that being an influence, just like this political correctness BS. Because, honestly, if you were going to say, hey, you can't say that word anymore, then why are you allowed to say it? I don't care if it's your word. You should at least kind of throw your 50 cents in and agree to also stop using that word if you don't like other people outside of your demographic using that word. Like, for instance, what people say with white people, they either call them crackers or honkies. Me, as a white person, I really don't care. I mean, I know it's a racial slur, but if it really bothered me that much, I would have just not given them the time of day. Like, just walk away from it. However, if they were harassing me, like, planning on beating me up for it, then yeah, I'd have a problem. But I'm not saying you should, like, basically censor a word or basically say, oh, well, it's exclusive to only us for saying it. We can only call ourselves that. But it's like, why? If you don't like people using that word, why still use it with yourselves? Even if that wasn't the word they gave you, I mean, come on. The least you could do is go full circle, right? You don't have to make everything a living hell for people. But I guess people say, oh, well, you can't say that because you weren't oppressed. It's like, that's not entirely true. There have been plenty of white people who have been oppressed, just maybe not as much as other people have. You have Freemasons with various varieties of different ethnicities and races. They were sent to the Holocaust as well. Like, communists, political opponents of the Nazi Party were also sent to the Holocaust. It wasn't just Jews, it wasn't just gypsies, it wasn't just people who weren't, quote, Aryan, which they used incorrectly because Aryan meant noble, which is another thing you can't use now because people have tarnished it so much that no one even knows its original meaning anymore. And not only that, but a lot of people have common misconceptions about other things like nationalism. And I'm not trying to sway anyone's political beliefs, but I want to just make something specifically clear. There's a difference between nationalism and National Socialism. The Nazis were National Socialists, not necessarily nationalists. So remember that. Yes, there are some people out there who are nationalists who take it to the extreme, but not all of them are like that. Some of them are just really patriot or have a lot of patriotism for their country. That can also fall under the category of nationalism. You don't have to be a Nazi to be a nationalist. You also don't have to be a complete douchebag to be a nationalist. So, I hate it when people, or not hate, because that's a strong word to use, but I find it really disappointing that most people say, oh, well, this is done like that and that. Just like when people say, oh, communism's better than National Socialism, even though, surprisingly enough, communism killed a lot more people than National Socialism did. granted, both sides were actually bad because, you know, no one actually, first of all, no one actually followed the communist system correctly whenever those countries who actually called themselves communist, they didn't actually use pure communism. They kind of had it as a dictatorship. Not that I believe in communism, but I'm saying, you know, as far as teachings go, Karl Marx wanted this to happen. That's not communism, that's a dictatorship. And he wrote it in his Communist Manifesto. But, again, just my, I'm gonna get off my soapbox now and stop being an attention whore. Just signing off here. I don't know when I'll get to uploading this, but I want to get this done as soon as possible. I'm Captain Alex Mason, and I'll see you guys next time.